To understand the magnitude of his effort, you must first confront the image of the ruin.
Yeah, buddy! Hey, wait!
Yeah, I want to be a totally different bodybuilder.
In the present day, we see a man often confined to a wheelchair, his movements stiff, his gait labored when he attempts to stand. This is Ronnie Coleman. For those who worship at the altar of iron, he is simply the king. He is the 8-time Mr. Olympia, a biological anomaly who dominated the world of bodybuilding with a level of mass and conditioning that has never been replicated, and likely never will be. But if you strip away the titles, the golden trophies, and the yeah buddy memes, you are left with the wreckage. His spine is a literal scaffold of titanium screws, cages, and fused bone holding together, the ruins of what was once the strongest human body on the planet. This story is not a standard sports motivation. It is not about genetics, nor is it about the cliche of hard work. This is about a contract, a Faustian bargain signed in 1998 that traded the ability to walk in, his later years for a crown of eternal glory. It is the autopsy of an impossible transformation that broke every known rule of human physiology. It is a chronicle of a relentless cascade of pain, surgery, and regret, or perhaps terrifyingly, the stunning lack thereof. The architect and the anomaly, the cop who didn't want to be king. Long before the accolades and the fame, Ronnie Coleman was simply Officer Coleman. For nearly 2 decades, from 1989 to 2004, he served the Arlington Police Department. This fact provides the first insight into his psyche. Ronnie did not want to be a bodybuilder. He wanted a free gym membership. In 1989, a fellow officer named Gustavo Arlada told Ronnie about a hardcore gym called Metroflex, owned by amateur bodybuilder Brian Dobson. The gym was a dungeon in every sense of the word. It had no air conditioning, rusted iron plates, and 100-degree heat that smelled permanently of sweat and ammonia. Dobson, seeing the freakish potential in the young officer, offered him a deal, a lifetime. Free membership if he competed in the upcoming Mr. Texas show. Ronnie, who was frugal and pragmatic, agreed. He didn't just win, he defeated Dobson himself. The Meso-Alien 2 attribute Ronnie Coleman's size solely to the pharmacy as an insult to biology. It is a lazy explanation for a complex miracle. If you gave 1,000 men the exact same chemical cocktail that Ronnie Coleman took, not a single one of them would look like him. Most would end up in a hospital, and none would end up with a Sando trophy. To understand the monster, we must first look at the blueprint. Ronnie Coleman was not made in a gym. He was made in the womb, the matriarch of muscle. If you want to find the source of the king's muscle, you have to look at his mother, Jessie Benton. In the world of elite bodybuilding, genetics are the currency, and Ronnie was born a billionaire. Ronnie tells the story often. As a child, he would walk into the grocery store with his mother, and people wouldn't stare at him. They would stare at her. Jessie Benton was a physical anomaly. She never touched a dumbbell in her life. She never drank a protein shake, yet she possessed arms that were muscular, dense, and rock hard. Ronnie famously joked, "My mom has bigger arms than half the guys I compete against." This confirms a terrifying reality for his competitors. Ronnie Coleman didn't have to build the base, he inherited it. Long before the stage lights, Ronnie was already a freak. At Grambling State University, he played American football as a linebacker. Ronnie wasn't lifting to be a bodybuilder, he was lifting to tackle people. He wanted to be fast, he wanted to be agile, but his genetics betrayed him. Teammates recall that Ronnie would look at a barbell and his chest would grow. While other players struggled to put on 5 pounds of mass over an entire season, Ronnie would accidentally put on 10 pounds in a month. In somatotyping, there are ectomorphs and dumorphs and mesomorphs. Ronnie was something else entirely. He was a Meso-Alien. He could eat cake and stay lean. He could lift heavy and not break. He was a glitch in the matrix, the Myostatin mutation. How is this biologically possible? The answer likely lies in a gene called Myostatin. In a normal human body, myostatin acts as a brake. It tells your muscles to stop growing so that you don't become too heavy for your heart to support. It is a survival mechanism, but looking at Ronnie Coleman in his prime, scientists believe he possessed a deficiency similar to the Belgian blue bull, an animal that lacks this gene and grows muscle boundlessly. His body simply didn't have the stop button. While his rivals like Jay Cutler had to fight their body's natural limits every single day, Ronnie Coleman's body was a runaway train with no brakes. When he fed it protein, it turned instantly into contractile tissue. If you still doubt the genetics, look at the evidence from 1991. This was the World Amateur Championships before the heavy androgen use and the mass monster era. Ronnie Coleman was drug tested, and by bodybuilding standards, he was natural. It is easy to forget that for the vast majority of his reign, Ronnie Coleman was not a full-time bodybuilder. He was a full-time police officer from 1989 to 2003. While winning Mr. Olympia titles, he was punching a clock, answering emergency calls, and patrolling the streets. This created one of the most absurd dynamics in law enforcement history. Imagine an individual in the middle of a heated dispute, adrenaline pumping. Then, a squad car pulls up, the door opens, and out steps a 300-pound man with 24-inch arms, wearing a uniform that looks like it's holding on for dear life. Ronnie didn't need typical equipment. He carried a quality no other officer had: the authority of size. Ronnie tells the story of arriving at a chaotic scene. He didn't yell, he just stood there, filling the entire hallway. The room went silent. The group looked at his arms, then at his neck, and simply sat down. He was a human calming tactic. But being the king in a uniform had its downsides. Ronnie was so wide that he literally could not fit comfortably in the front seat of the patrol car. His lats would touch the driver's side door and the passenger seat at the same time. He spent 8 hours a day squeezed into a metal box, patrolling the Texas heat, only to clock out and squat 800 pounds, while pros today complain if a meal is 5 minutes late. Ronnie was apprehending lawbreakers on a diet of chicken and rice. In 1997, Ronnie Coleman placed 9th at the Mr. Olympia. He was 230 pounds, aesthetic but human. 12 months later, under the guidance of Chad Nichols, he returned at 245 pounds. This wasn't just weight. It was striated basket, granted. Gaining 15 pounds of stage-ready muscle in a single year at the elite level is an exponential leap. It was a biological anomaly. The Myostatin domain theory. How was this physically possible? The answer lies in the system. A muscle fiber is a giant cell containing hundreds of nuclei, each acting as a command center for protein synthesis. When an athlete trains with Ronnie's brutality, satellite cells fuse with the muscle fiber, donating new nuclei. Crucially, these nuclei are permanent. Ronnie had built an unparalleled bank of these myonuclei over decades of powerlifting. The 1998 transformation was a rapid reinflation. Chad Nichols' protocol flooded those prime muscle cells with growth signals, maximizing the output of every single nucleus. The engine was already built. Nichols simply poured nitromethane into the tank. Ronnie's diet was a biological paradox. While rivals suffered through dry chicken, Ronnie consumed a diet that would be deemed dirty. His metabolism burned calories so efficiently that clean food couldn't provide the density needed. Chad Nichols' solution was radical: high molecular weight carbs combined with extreme protocols of insulin. The cornerstone was dextrose, but Ronnie often used simple sugar sources, including cans of apple pie filling. The logic was terrifyingly efficient. A fast-acting insulin protocol opened the cellular gates, and the immediate consumption of pie filling provided the raw fuel. The hormone acted as a key, instantly unlocking every muscle cell and driving the sugar inside to be stored as glycogen. To maintain 300 pounds of muscle, Ronnie ate the equivalent of 10 to 12 chicken breasts daily, 600 grams of protein, but he had a secret weapon: KC Masterpiece barbecue sauce. He didn't measure it, he poured it. Nutritionists were horrified by the sodium, but Nichols knew better. Ronnie's metabolism was a blast furnace. The sodium didn't make him watery. It acted as a pump volumizer, helping to drive water into the muscle cells rather than under the skin. Combined with his morning ritual of grits and melted cheese, this was soul food science, designed to kickstart his anabolic drive. The 3 a.m. solitude. While his rivals slept, the king was at work. Ronnie famously trained at 3 a.m. every single day. By the year 2000, he was so famous he couldn't walk into a gym without being mobbed. He needed silence. Metroflex owner Brian Dobson gave him a key, and Ronnie would let himself into the pitch-black gym while the world slept. Ronnie used a rolling schedule where he trained every body part twice a week. Monday was back and biceps, Tuesday was chest and triceps, and so on. This meant no muscle group ever rested for a full 7 days. He was constantly tearing down and rebuilding tissue. The origin of "Yeah, buddy." The screams are legendary. "Lightweight baby" and "Yeah, buddy" are now global catchphrases. but their origin is mundane. Ronnie wasn't trying to create a brand. He was bored and alone. Training in a silent gym with no music, he needed to generate his own hype. He started screaming, "Yeah, buddy," to break the silence. The phrase "lightweight, baby" was a psychological trick. He would stare at a bar loaded with 800 pounds, a weight that could be fatal, and scream that it was light. He was gaslighting his own central nervous system, convincing his body that the impossible was easy. Training like a powerlifter to support his unnatural mass, Ronnie adopted a training style no other champion dared touch. He trained like a strongman with the conditioning of a bodybuilder. The 800-pound squat. The footage is etched in history. Ronnie, wearing a belt and knee wraps, screams his catchphrase before descending with 800 pounds on his back. The discompression from this single lift is astronomical. When he screams, he is fighting the reality that his spine is being compressed between the iron and the gravity of his own 300-pound frame. The 800-pound deadlift, perhaps even more dangerous, was the deadlift. The rotational torque on the lower spine was a ticking time bomb. He did not do these for singles. He did them for reps. He famously deadlifted 800 pounds for 2 reps, later stating his biggest regret was not getting a third. The back, the glutes, and the impossible map. In bodybuilding, the rule is shows are won from the back. The front is for the magazines. The back is where the truth is told. When Ronnie Coleman turned his back to the judges, the contest didn't just end, it vanished. The most terrifying moment for any competitor was Ronnie's rear lat spread. Witnesses described the motion as mechanical. Ronnie would plant his feet, hook his thumbs, and expand. It wasn't just width, it was density. His lats seemed to unfurl like the wings of a predator, blocking out the stage lighting. While most bodybuilders have high lats, Ronnie's tied in practically at his hip bone, creating a solid wall of muscle that cast its own shadows. Ronnie's traps were permanent fixtures. In the rear double bicep pose, the trap shelf formed a landscape of twisted knots. It looked like a bag of walnuts had been stuffed under his skin. This was the grainy look of a powerlifter. Muscle fibers torn apart and rebuilt with scar tissue and steel. The lower back is the hardest area to condition, yet Ronnie possessed the most detailed Christmas tree in history. When he crunched his lower back, the striations fanned out. The depth of these grooves was startling. You could practically stick a coin between the muscle bellies. This signaled to the judges that he had stripped away every ounce of body fat. The glute revolution. If the back secured the win, the glute secured the legend. Ronnie changed the criteria forever. To see muscle fibers here requires a body fat percentage of roughly 3%. Ronnie had deep horizontal cuts. When he squeezed his hips, his glutes looked like they were being etched by invisible lines. This shock and awe factor forced competitors to push themselves to the absolute limit just to compete. That's not human. It looks like an alien organism attached itself to his spine. Every king needs a challenger. For nearly a decade, the narrative was defined by Ronnie Coleman and Jay Cutler. But this was not a standard rivalry. It was a psychological dismantling. It was a man fighting a god, the blonde bomber versus the alien. Jay Cutler was the perfect anti-hero, the golden boy. Wealthy, handsome, and scientifically calculated, Jay treated bodybuilding like a Fortune 500 corporation. He was the CEO of his own body. Ronnie was pure chaos. He ate barbecue sauce and trained in a dungeon. The rivalry captivated the world because the man who did everything right kept losing to the man who did everything impossible. The rivalry truly began in 2001, the year the king almost fell. Ronnie showed up dehydrated and cramping. Jay Cutler was perfect, dry, full, and striated. For the first time, judges were split. Backstage, Jay Cutler was already celebrating. He was the virtual Mr. Olympia for 6 hours. But Ronnie does not lose. He went to his hotel, drank liters of water, and ate pizza to reinflate his flattened muscles. When he stepped back on stage, the monster had returned. He overwhelmed Jay Cutler, proving that even at his worst, he was better than Jay at his best. The true dominance was backstage. Jay Cutler tells the story of the locker room silence. The room would be buzzing with chatter until the door opened. Clack, into clack, clack. The sound of heavy boots. "Yeah, day, buddy." Ronnie's voice would boom, and the room would go dead silent. Grown men, 280-pound monsters, looked at the floor, terrified to make eye contact. When Ronnie took off his shirt, Jay describes it as the lights went out. In that silence, Ronnie broke their spirits before they even touched the stage. The 2003 domination. In 2003, Ronnie left humanity behind. He stepped on stage at 287 pounds, shredded to the bone. When Ronnie hit the rear lat spread, the crowd gasped. His lats looked like a hang glider. They started from his waist and ended at his ears. Jay Cutler admitted the painful truth. I looked over at him, and I knew. I wasn't fighting for the win. I was fighting for second place. Again. Despite the ferocity, there was a brotherhood. Jay Cutler was the wolf at the door. The reason Ronnie kept pushing the weights heavier and heavier. In a tragic twist, Jay Cutler is a major reason Ronnie Coleman is in a wheelchair today. If Jay hadn't been so good, Ronnie could have relaxed. But the threat of the blonde bomber forced the king to push himself to the absolute limit or just to keep the crown. Invincibility is a dangerous illusion. In 2002, 3 weeks after the Olympia, Ronnie traveled to the GNC Show of Strength for a victory lap. Waiting for him was Gunter Schlier camp. Ronnie showed up exhausted and watery while Gunter was peeled. The impossible happened. Gunter won. This loss proved that Ronnie could be beaten. It didn't break his spirit, it broke his restraint, leading to the monstrous 2003 version. We often say Jay Cutler beat Ronnie in 2006, but medically, Ronnie's body had reached its limit. When Ronnie hit his signature back pose in 2006, the crowd whispered. His left lat, that massive wing, had vanished, shrunk to half the size of the right. This was nerve damage. The years of 800-pound squats had compressed the discs in his spine so severely that signals were no longer reaching the muscle. Jay Cutler wasn't fighting the king anymore. He was fighting a fading legend. The intensity required to maintain this physique was a dangerous gamble. In 2001, the combination of protocols nearly overwhelmed him. He told Chad Nichols he felt like his body was shutting down. Instead of the hospital, he took a high-stakes load of sugar and water. He survived the very methods that sent others to an early end. The bill for the heavy lifting eventually came due. Ronnie has undergone 13 major surgeries on his spine and hips. The last 3 procedures alone cost nearly $2 million. Surgeons attempted to stabilize his vertebrae with cages and screws, but that the structure was so stressed that the metal would snap under the pressure. This is the biological tax of the old era. Ronnie spent $2 million just to try and fix what the iron broke. This is the biological tax of a bygone era. A time when building a legacy required you to sacrifice your health, your mobility, and your future. But the world has changed. You don't have to break your back to build a kingdom. If Ronnie had the digital leverage of 2025, he could have built his buddy empire from a laptop. Without a single surgery, without the king's pain, this is where Tube Mastery by Matt Parr comes in. It is the modern vehicle for king's wealth. Matt Parr teaches you how to build a faceless YouTube empire, assets that pay you while you sleep, instead of costs that follow you to the hospital. Stop trading your physical health for a paycheck. Build a legacy that gives you freedom, not a wheelchair. Click the link in the description to join the new era of the king. Don't just work harder, work smarter. Secure your crown today. Why we will never see another king. To understand why Ronnie remains the king, look at the modern landscape. If you turn on the Mr. Olympia today, you see monsters who weigh 300 pounds. But ask any veteran, and they will tell you. Ronnie Coleman was an extinction event. 1. Granite versus balloons. The primary difference is texture. Modern bodybuilders often have a softer, rounded look. Ronnie looked carved out of granite. When he flexed, the muscle shattered into distinct, deep fibers. 2. Survival training. Modern pros use optimal training to stimulate muscle without stressing the joints. Ronnie trained for survival. When you put 800 pounds on your back, the body enters a state of extreme urgency. To survive, it recruits every single fiber deep within the muscle belly, creating a 3-dimensional density that machines cannot replicate. 3. The control. Modern mass often comes with a distended midsection, but for the majority of his reign, Ronnie maintained a tight waist. He could hit a vacuum pose that defied his 300-pound frame. He was the perfect storm, a glitch in the matrix that will never happen again. 4. The standard has shifted. Finally, we will never see another Ronnie because the sport won't allow it. The modern generation is smarter and more afraid. They have seen the toll it took on the king. They want the title, but they want to walk when they are 50. Ronnie Coleman was the only man willing to pay the full price of admission. He maxed out the credit card of human physiology. Despite the physical cost, Ronnie Coleman is not a tragic case. He is a business mogul. He leveraged his status to launch the Yeah Buddy supplement line. Monetizing his own mythology, he didn't just win trophies. He built a brand that lives on long after the iron was put down. Conclusion, the eternal king. The transformation of Ronnie Coleman was not a simple muscle gain. It was a defiant act of biological conquest. He is a living artifact of the most dangerous era in sports history. The man who ignored the collapsing discs and survived the impossible protocols. The cost was paid in pain, in titanium screws, and in the loss of his mobility. But for Ronnie, the price of the crown was worth everything. His body is broken, but his legacy is eternal. Somewhere in the ruins of his spine, the myonuclei remain, a permanent testament to a throne that can never be taken away. Lightweight than baby. Yeah, buddy.